So you ignored the law, and even with over 100,000 employees at your disposal, you acted with some mixture of staggering incompetence, cold indifference, and jaded cruelty towards more than 1,000 victims raped, abused, and trafficked. This performance screams.
This may look like another heated committee exchange, but it's actually a referendum on the integrity of federal law enforcement. What's really being tested here is whether the Department of Justice serves the Constitution or serves political loyalty. This raises broader questions about prosecutorial independence, institutional credibility, and whether oversight still functions in a polarized era. In this video, we'll break down how this confrontation exposes a deeper struggle over control of federal justice power.
Work to be done in that area, but I want to thank the Attorney General for her great work in the first year on the job, and I want to thank you for being here. With that, I would yield to the ranking member for an opening statement.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Attorney General Bondi. You've got the best lawyer's job in America because your mission is justice and your clients are the American people. But to promote justice for the people, you've got to listen to the victims, like the women seated behind you today. Those are just some of the hundreds of survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's global sex trafficking ring who are demanding that the truth be told and are demanding accountability for the abusers who trafficked and raped them. You still haven't met with these survivors. So with their permission, let me introduce to you the survivors and late survivors' family members who are present today. There's Teresa Helm, there's Jess Michaels, Laura Bloom McGee, Danny Bensky, Liz Stein, Marina Lacerda, Sky and Amanda Roberts, who are the family of the late Virginia Giuffre, Charlene Richard, and Lisa Phillips. Now, you're not showing a lot of interest in the victims, Madam Attorney General, whether it's Epstein's human trafficking ring or the homicidal governmental violence against citizens in Minneapolis. As Attorney General, you're siding with the perpetrators and you're ignoring the victims. That will be your legacy unless you act quickly to change course. You're running a massive Epstein cover-up right out of the Department of Justice. You've been ordered by subpoena and by Congress to turn over 6 million documents, photographs, and videos in the Epstein files, but you've turned over only 3 million. You say you're not turning over the other 3 million because they're somehow duplicative, but we know that there are actual memos of victim statements in there, and you also took down the Department of Justice's prosecution memo from 2019. So it's clearly not all duplicative, but even if it were, why not release it? Just release all the duplicative stuff. In the half you did produce, you redacted the names of abusers, enablers, accomplices, and co-conspirators, apparently to spare them embarrassment and disgrace, which is the exact opposite of what the law ordered you to do. Even worse, you shockingly failed to redact many of the victims' names, which is what you were ordered to do by Congress. Some of the victims had come forward publicly, but many had not. Many had kept their torment private, even from family and friends, but you published their names, their identities, their images on thousands of pages for the world to see. So you ignored the law, and even with over 100,000 employees at your disposal, you acted with some mixture of staggering incompetence, cold indifference, and jaded cruelty towards more than 1,000 victims raped, abused, and trafficked. This performance screams cover-up. Convicted sex trafficker and groomer Ghislaine Maxwell opened the gates of hell to Virginia Giuffre and hundreds of other victims, as Virginia recorded in her remarkable book, Nobody's Girl. But when Maxwell was subpoenaed to come testify before Congress, you and Todd Blanche quickly moved her from a higher security prison to a minimum security camp in Texas, where she's enjoyed 5-star treatment, including catered meals, private gym time, and access to a therapy puppy. All because Todd Blanche, who's utterly failed to investigate the monstrous crimes of Epstein and Maxwell's co-conspirators, spent 9 hours with Maxwell and satisfied himself that she would have nothing untoward to say about Donald Trump, which is your only real interest in the matter, based on institutional performance. But abandoning victims and coddling perpetrators is what you do best. When the FBI opened a criminal investigation into the brutal killing in Minneapolis of Renee Good, a poet and 37-year-old mother of 3, by Trump's masked paramilitary ICE agents, you shut it down. You claim you're investigating the cold-blooded murder of Alex Preddy, an ICU nurse at the VA. But how can we trust the administration when the president and Kristi Noem call Preddy a domestic terrorist and Stephen Miller called him a would-be assassin? Not only do you refuse to share evidence with the state and local investigators and prosecutors in Minnesota, you have blocked their access to the crime scene and the evidence. How are you seeking justice for Marimar Martinez, the Montessori school teacher in Chicago who was shot 5 times by a Border Patrol agent who bragged about it on text, or the family of Keith Porter, a father of 2 shot and killed by an off-duty ICE agent in LA, or the family of Silverio Villegas Gonzalez, shot and killed in Illinois minutes after he dropped his kids off at school. There's no sign of any movement at the Department of Justice. You even launched a criminal investigation into Renee Good's grieving widow. How sick is that? But it's even worse. You've turned the People's Department of Justice into Trump's instrument of revenge. Trump orders up prosecutions like pizza, and you deliver every time. He tells you to go after James Comey, Letitia James, Lisa Cook, and Jerome Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve Board, and members of Congress like Adam Schiff, Mark Kelly, Alyssa Slotkin, Chrissy Houlihan, Jason Crow, Chris Deluzio, and Maggie Goodlander, to name a few, and you snap to it. You replace real prosecutors with counterfeit stooges who robotically do the president's bidding. Nothing in American history comes close to this complete corruption of the justice function and contamination of federal law enforcement. And the good news is many serious lawyers at DOJ, including some of your own original appointees, have refused your lawless orders. Danielle Sassoon, your original pick for acting U.S. Attorney in Manhattan, resigned rather than follow your corrupt order to quash an indictment against Mayor Eric Adams as a political favor from Donald Trump. A Federalist Society member who clerked for Justice Scalia, U.S. Attorney Sassoon refused to participate in this blatantly corrupt scheme. Her top assistant, Hagan Scotton, an Iraqi war vet and 2-time Bronze Star recipient who clerked for Chief Justice Roberts, and then Judge Kavanaugh, promptly resigned too, writing to your office, quote, "I expect you will eventually find someone who is enough of a fool or enough of a coward to file your motion, but it was never going to be me." You and the president nominated Eric Siebert, a 15-year career prosecutor, to be your U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. But after 5 months of investigating Letitia James and James Comey, he found no evidence to justify criminal charges. So you forced him out. You replaced him with Lindsay Halligan, Trump's personal lawyer from the Mar-a-Lago documents case, who had 0 prosecutorial experience and no qualifications. And then you were humiliated when a federal judge found that this corrupt appointment was blatantly unlawful and threw out Halligan's indictments entirely. And grand juries of American citizens have repeatedly rejected your vendettas and baseless indictments brought by the hacks left at DOJ now, with 2 different grand juries in Virginia voting down indictments against Letitia James in a single week. And just yesterday, another grand jury shut down your vendetta factory by rejecting indictments against the 6 members of Congress who had spoken out to remind all service members that they have a duty to refuse illegal orders. You tried to get a grand jury to indict 6 members of Congress who were veterans of our armed forces on charges of seditious conspiracy simply for exercising their First Amendment rights. I hope you will heed the wisdom and the constitutional patriotism of those grand jurors and not try it again by doubling down on that humiliation. As your best lawyers are sacked for having participated in the January 6th case or just flee for the exits now, your new lawyers keep lying in court. In dozens of cases, they've been excoriated for lying to federal judges. Chief Judge Boasberg, right here in D.C., suggested your Department of Justice perpetrated a fraud on the court. Other judges found your statements to be, quote, inexplicably misleading, patently incredible, totally inconsistent, and so disingenuous that the court is left with little confidence that the government can be trusted to tell the truth about anything. Now, as ranking member, I asked the chairman to add a few extra rounds of questions today because we each have 5 hours of questions, not 5 minutes. But we're stuck with 5 minutes. That's clearly insufficient to give voice to America's victims and survivors and to demand answers about all the corruption and cover-ups that we see at DOJ right now. We've got just 1 round, so we ask you politely but firmly, Madam Attorney General, please do not waste 1 second of our precious time by evading questions, by changing the subject, or engaging in personal attacks against members of Congress. We saw your performance in the Senate, and we're not going to accept that. This isn't a game. In the Senate, you brought something with you called a burn book, a binder of smears to attack members personally for doing the people's work of oversight. Please set the burn book aside and answer our questions. And when you hear us reclaim our time, that means it's time for you to stop speaking. We only have 5 minutes, so when we reclaim our time, that means you stop. And if you don't, we will ask the chair to stop the clock and let you go on his time. The quality of justice in America depends on the character of our government. Please do your job and bring the Department of Justice back from the brink. The survivors seated behind you and the American people watching everywhere deserve a Department of Justice worthy of its name. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, all of the opening statements will be included in the record. We will now introduce today's witness, the Honorable.
The room fell silent as Congressman Jamie Raskin leaned forward and delivered words that cut through the chamber like a blade. He reminded the Attorney General that her mission was justice and that her clients were the American people. And then he turned deliberately toward the survivors seated behind her. He named them, one by one. He made them visible. In that moment, the hearing stopped being procedural. It became moral. Raskin's indictment was not whispered, it was direct. He accused the Department of Justice under Attorney General Pam Bondi of failing those who had already endured the unthinkable. He alleged a cover-up. He alleged selective disclosure of the Epstein files. He alleged redactions that shielded the powerful while exposing the vulnerable. He pointed to missing documents, millions of pages not yet produced, and asked the question hanging over the entire proceeding: who is being protected and at whose expense? This was not a partisan skirmish. It was an existential challenge to the credibility of the nation's highest law enforcement office. When Raskin said, "You're running a massive Epstein cover-up," right out of the Department of Justice, the accusation reverberated beyond the committee walls. Because the Department of Justice is not meant to belong to any president. It is not meant to serve any party. It is meant to serve the Constitution. It is meant to serve truth. And yet, the allegations laid out in that chamber painted a picture of something else. Of withheld files, removed memos, redacted names, and decisions that appear to favor political calculations over transparency. Raskin described resignations of career prosecutors who refused orders they believed crossed legal and ethical lines. He cited federal judges who questioned the credibility of the department's representations in court. He described grand juries rejecting cases they deemed unsupported. These are not small matters. These are fault lines. Because when prosecutors resign rather than sign a filing, it signals an internal conflict over conscience. When judges describe government arguments as misleading or disingenuous, it raises alarms about institutional integrity. And when survivors of exploitation sit in a hearing room still waiting to be heard, the issue becomes not abstract, but human. The power of the federal government is immense. It can indict, it can investigate, it can compel testimony, but that power is legitimate only when it is exercised impartially, only when it is guided by principle, not by pressure. Raskin framed his criticism in sweeping terms, suggesting that the department has become an instrument of political vendetta rather than a guardian of justice. Whether one agrees with that assessment or not, the seriousness of the charge demands scrutiny. In a constitutional republic, oversight is not optional, it is foundational. And then came the deeper question, not about any single file or case, but about character. The quality of justice in America depends on the character of our government, he said. That sentence lingers. Justice is not just a statute. It is a standard. It requires competence. It requires fairness. It requires transparency. If names of alleged perpetrators are shielded while victims' identities are exposed, even inadvertently, trust erodes. If documents ordered by subpoena remain partially undisclosed, suspicion grows. If political rivals are investigated aggressively while allies receive deference, the perception of equal treatment fractures. Trust, once fractured, is not easily restored. The Attorney General sat listening as Raskin urged her to bring the Department of Justice back from the brink. That phrase, back from the brink, suggests a precipice, a tipping point, a moment when institutions either recommit to their highest ideals or slide further into public doubt. For the American people watching, this is not theater, it is a test. The Epstein case has long symbolized a broader anxiety, that wealth and influence can distort accountability, that powerful figures can evade consequences ordinary citizens would face, that secrecy can obscure uncomfortable truths. When members of Congress argue over millions of unreleased documents, it taps into that fear. It forces the question, is the system capable of holding everyone equally accountable? Democracy depends on the answer being yes, but democracy also depends on due process, on careful review, on avoiding reckless disclosures that harm innocent parties. Balancing transparency with legal obligation is complex. And yet complexity cannot become an excuse for opacity. As the gavel moved the hearing forward, the underlying tension remained unresolved. The survivors still sat behind the witness table. The documents remain partially contested. The accusations hang in the air. This is the struggle of our era, not merely over policies, but over trust. Over whether institutions serve the people or the powerful, over whether justice is blind or selectively cited. History will not remember the shouting. It will remember whether the truth was ultimately revealed. It will remember whether accountability followed evidence. It will remember whether those entrusted with power upheld their oath. In a republic, oversight is not sabotage. It is stewardship. And the American people deserve a Department of Justice worthy of its name. If you believe transparency matters, if you believe accountability must never be optional, if you believe that justice must stand above politics, then stay informed, stay engaged. Subscribe to Liberty Report USA. Support our work to expose the truth.